Reaction pouring in from Chrystia Freeland and the Liberals' fall economic update. The Conservatives said they need to see a plan, one that showed a sense of fiscal constraint after the pandemic ended. Well, the deficit is now projected at best to be $381 billion in 2021. The government expects that to fall significantly over the next 2 years, but it could go as high as almost $400 billion. By 2025 or 26, they say the deficit will be lowered to $24.9 billion, but how will they do it? What's the plan? And will the opposition support the $25 billion of spending, including $1 billion immediately for long-term care homes right now? Let's bring in the Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole. Good to have you, and I hope you and your family are doing well, sir. Just right off the bat, your thoughts on this document, and if it will come to a confidence motion, if at this moment you could support it.
Well, Evan, we're very disappointed. We've been asking for weeks, as you know, about a plan for vaccines, and there was nothing. In fact, they've misled Canadians with respect to vaccines, and we have no economy, Evan, without vaccines on the horizon and rapid testing to get us from where we are now to the vaccine. We're actually months behind where other countries are with rapid tests. So we're frustrated by a constantly slow, evasive government, and there is no economy in the midst of a pandemic unless we have those two key tools, tests and vaccines.
Okay, just on testing, they got $365 million for testing and supplies. This is new spending. $1.5 billion to provide and procure and deliver PPE. I mean, so there's $2 billion plus in this document on new spending on that very issue.
Well, we should have had rapid tests last summer, Evan. This is the problem with this government. Mr. Trudeau, on one of his porch step briefings in March, said that testing was one of the critical things to do in the pandemic, and we were one of the last countries in the OECD to roll out in a major way rapid tests. Because what rapid tests mean, Evan, is we can keep parts of the economy moving. There can even possibly, depending on the number of cases, be some travel. There can be more tools to get frontline workers back after a possible exposure. I saw firsthand what waiting in lines for hours and hours and hours does. So rapid tests are a key tool. And the bright spot on the horizon was the vaccine. And I think Canadians will be very disappointed because in days, Americans and people in the United Kingdom will be receiving the vaccine. We can't even get an answer from this government on when Canada will start receiving it.
Okay, but let me focus on this document, though, because, and I appreciate we've done a fair bit of a lot of journalism, I think, on when we're going to get the vaccine. But can we just focus on this document? There's $1 billion for the long-term care homes. Is that, and you know, they have been the hot zone. Is that enough?
Well, what we don't like about that is it appears that the government is attaching a series of strings and conditions on that. In the middle of a pandemic, when we know the most vulnerable are in the long-term care homes or in Quebec, the CHSLDs, we need to make sure that we get those funds there and let the provinces adapt to the needs of their system. They all do it slightly different. There should not be an Ottawa knows best. You only get some support if you fill in these 1,000 forms and agree to do things our way. So we want to see how they're going to roll this out. I'm quite sure the provinces are going to be very upset that they're tying strings to this. We need to do better for our seniors, but it needs to be quick, not bureaucratic, not Ottawa knows best.
Yeah, although I think they just don't want that money rattling around general revenues. I think they want it targeted. But you're right. I think they're going to get some pushback from certain provinces. Let's talk about the deficit.
But that's Ottawa's knows best. That's Ottawa's knows best, right? They think the provinces will have it rattling around. They won't do it well. That's the paternalistic approach the Trudeau government has with everything. We know better than you do, and that's not how our country works, Evan.
Yeah. Listen, maybe, although when you're transferring money, as you know, there is a history of that, and there's, under Martin, there was an Ottawa knows best strings attached to wait times. Under Stephen Harper, they cut those strings. So 100%, there's two different ideological approaches on that. Can we just talk about the deficit, $381 billion?
Well, there's the Constitution, which actually says that's the way it's supposed to work, right? And that's why I think in the middle of a pandemic, Evan, we should be allowing the provinces who set up their health systems, who set up the way their long-term care and their at-home care work, for some people within their healthcare system? Why does someone in an office tower in Ottawa know the needs of someone in Saguenay better than someone in Quebec, or someone in Sault Ste. Marie better than Ontario and Toronto knows it? This is what we've got to change. In a pandemic, there should be no, you must do these things to get money to help our seniors. That's what I think provinces are frustrated with this government.
Right. Fair point. But if the provinces had aced the long-term care homes, but they bungled it so badly and unfortunately, tragically. Let me quickly go on to deficits, though, Mr. O'Toole. $381 billion. You had said on a Quebec program that you would have spent a lot of that anyway on some of these programs. Are you concerned about the amount of spending, or do you think, look, it's a pandemic, we understand the needs, it's okay to spend that money as long as there's a plan to bring it back to balance? What is your critique on that, sir?
Well, we have voted in favor of programs assisting people with the CERB, with small business relief, the wage subsidy. In fact, we pushed the government, as you know, Evan, to get it from 10%, which was going to be insufficient. We pushed them up to 75. So we support that, but that doesn't even account for half of their deficit. So what we have to do is to make sure that we get people working. That means there'll be less people drawing on these programs. So now is not the time for experiments by Mr. Trudeau saying, we're only going to hope that these industries recover and these ones don't. We're going to transition them because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We need everyone working. We need every cylinder in our economic engine firing. And with that higher employment, with showing Canada's open for investment and job creation, that's our path back to normal. Canadians want their lives back, and this economic statement did not provide a path to keeping our economy moving with rapid tests, and it did not provide what we're really waiting for, which is the vaccine. So that's why we're disappointed, Evan.
What about the tax measures on Amazon and Netflix for remittances of the GST and the HST? Would you support that?
Well, we've wanted to see a much more strict approach to some of the American web giants. The Trudeau government has been very cozy with them from the transition days of Mr. Trudeau with Google and Sidewalk Labs and a whole range of things. So we would rather see some GST relief, perhaps, than trying to go around through distribution channels or other means. We're going to see what they're going to do. We're generally the party that likes to see fewer or reduction in tax measures, not the introduction of new ones. But we do want to see a leveling of the playing field. I've been talking about this with respect to digital subscriptions, streaming services. It's been unfair, particularly for Quebec, where there's limited content for French Canadians. So we're going to review that part of it and to see, is this actually the best way to level the playing field?
Okay, so not outright against that. You know, one of the things that's a lot of people are curious about in this is they're talking about $100 billion of new spending over 3 years, but they only outlined $25 billion this year. So there's $75 billion. We have no idea where that's going to go. What concerns do you have on that?
Well, there's not much plan in here at all. You've pointed out one big gap in any detail about spending. There's also, they're suggesting that they're helping the tourism and some of the travel sectors that are literally acutely impacted. We've been talking about that for months, but there's no details, not even any amounts on this. So what's interesting, Evan, this had all the trappings of a budget. They had the book. They're going to need legislation to implement some of these measures. We haven't had a budget for, almost closing in on 2 years. They didn't have any detail, even though they're using this in a budget document type style. So I think Canadians wanted to see a plan on the critical things, as I said, the tests and vaccines. Right. But we need some details here, and we're not even getting that.
Well, what do you make of the fiscal guardrails? They say, look, we actually have a 3 to 5 year plan. You can see our spending and our expectation of revenues. It's not a fiscal anchor, but it's a guardrail. Does the guardrail give you any sense of direction here?
This is a way for them to explain Minister Freeland's mistakes when she first started talking about our nation's finances. She intimated that the fiscal anchor she would have would be low interest rates. Well, as long as low interest rates are in the environment, we're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year without question. They're now adding a few other measures to that. and calling them guardrails. You know, they used to say their fiscal anchor was debt to GDP, but now that that's closing in on 60%, they've come up with an entirely different set of figures, all based on Ms. Freeland's suggestion that they don't need a plan to have any control to spending as long as interest rates are low. But that burdens our children and future with a huge debt crisis at levels like this, Evan, if interest rates go up.
Yeah, okay, but and although our debt to GDP ratio, you know, compared to OECD countries is not bad, but as you say, it's creeping up there. Just last question, because I've got the finance minister, she's about to join us, and I mean, this will be a confidence motion. First of all, when do you expect the vote on this, and will the Conservatives support this, or will they reject this?
Well, there is no plan for the critical parts of the economy, so we're probably going to reject this. We're going to talk about it as a caucus. I'm a leader that makes sure I talk to my team and get our feedback. We're upset by the details. I am very happy that the plan I released in the spring for childcare for families, particularly women who've been adversely impacted in larger numbers by the recession, they took that entirely from what I talked about last spring. So I said some nice words about that in my speech. But overall, without rapid tests, without vaccine, there's no plan in the middle of a pandemic to keep this economy moving, Evan, and that's what we want to see when we have an economic update like this.
All right, Erin O'Toole, great to have you on the program, leader of the Conservative Party. Not loving this, ready to reject this if it comes to a confident motion when it does. Mr. O'Toole, great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Evan.